Hello, everyone. This is Sid Walker. Welcome to our webinar today. And if someone would let me know that you can hear me okay in the question box, that would be wonderful. Just to kind of confirm, looks like everything's working fine here. But just nice to confirm. There we go. Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, Tom. All right. So this is a preview webinar, is what I call it, for my sales training and coaching program for relationship-oriented financial advisors, sales consultants of all kind, or all kinds. And the title of my main program is Selling Without Wrestling, How to Have a 90% Closing Ratio and an Abundance of Quality Referrals Without Being Pushy or Controlling. Got the whole program in the in the title there. So anyway, the title today is Proven Tips to Double Your Closing Ratio Without Being Pushy. That's a big deal. I'm the champion of the relationship builder, which we're going to talk a lot about today, but that's a key distinction. I've been doing this coaching thing for 38 years and coached thousands of people, and kind of wandered into the more relationship-oriented type of approach a long time ago, and have just continued to refine it, and have just had amazing results, which we're going to talk about here. All right, so let's see. Go down here. Let's click on this guy. All right, so how to get the most out of today. Keep an open mind. I'm definitely, how should I call him? I mean, I'm more cutting edge. I'm, not as conventional wisdom. I think people tell me all the time everything I'm doing is based on common sense, but that's that's somewhat uncommon today to be using common sense. So anyway, my perspective is different. I'm a champion of the low-key approach, and you're going to learn all about that. I've got a proven knack for taking some of the most gentle, soft-spoken people and making them highly successful in sales, particularly in the financial services business, which has been my specialty forever. So no more thinking you need to be pushy or controlling, to make it big. You actually can be super low-key and be a top producer. And I've created some of the biggest producers in the financial services business who swear by the low-key approach. There's no way they'd ever go back to anything they were doing before. All right, quick summary. Quick summary of my background. I started out as a life insurance agent right out of college. Did that for about 4.5 years. Then I got involved with a psychologist. Started an outplacement firm in Denver. Ended up with Fortune 500 clients before I was 30. Got certified to coach by Cherie Carter Scott, who's considered the mother of coaching in 1982, so I was way ahead of the curve on the coaching, probably 15 years. And then I stayed involved in the life insurance business as a coach, out of the investment side in the 80s, and in combination of, as I said, coached all kinds of occupations, but especially been intangible sales, and that's the part that's always been the most fun for me. So I like to say my average client's got a 90% closing ratio without using any sales technique whatsoever. Really true. If you're a relationship builder, you don't need it. You don't need sales technique. Everything I talk about is highly tested and proven. Again, thousands of clients, and there isn't anything that I don't use. I'm on the phone every day. I prospect. I make phone calls. I sell all the time. Obviously, I sell coaching, but I'm using all the things that I'm teaching other people. Sometimes that takes a while. I jokingly will say some, although it's probably truer than it sounds. But after I've said something, 25 or 50 times, other people, I do it myself. That's my promise. So you know how that goes. All right. My promise today too. What I'm going to talk about is easier, more fun, and will result in more sales than what most of you are currently doing. Obviously, as I've already noticed, I've got a bunch of clients on the line here, so some of my clients could easily teach the course. They've been doing this for a long time. So the purpose of our preview today, share highlights. I've helped a lot of people double their incomes. I've got a few people I've helped them double their incomes 4 times. They're making a lot of money. And it's not because I'm a financial genius by any means. I'm just really good at the psychology. And the goal is to feel peaceful, relaxed, confidence, self-fulfilled. There's more to this than making money. Obviously, that's important, but you also, as a relationship builder, how do you feel about yourself? How do your clients feel about you? How effective is your communication with people? How's your stress level? So we're after trying to improve all those areas so that you've got all the key elements working in sync. You're feeling great about what you're doing. So bottom line, you're having more fun and you're making more money. I guess that's usually, for most people, sums up what they want more of. I've got a big training and coaching website. I made that free with donations here. Let me click on this, see what happens here. So that's the pitch page. If you click on free, unlimited free trial up here, or free access, that'll take you to an opt-in page. Just fill in that information, and then that'll take you to the members only area. Just remember, it's yellow. If it's yellow, you're still opting in. If it's white, it says members only area, then you're in. So there's 100 hours of audio on here, downloadable. 80%, 85% of my whole course is on here. This core training, that's a $1,000 course I did a number of years ago. A lot of people did that and loved it. The supplemental training, that's a lot of, there's 13 webinars there on all different topics. If you like the topic, check it out. And I could keep going. There's just tons. We'll go into the handout archives today for a couple of handouts. But anyway, this is a huge resource and it's free at this point. I'm asking for donations. If you make a big sale, send me a little bit. All right. I've already had some donations. I wasn't sure how that would work, but so far so good. I've had a few people actually take me up on the offer. So anyway, good news is it's all free. Donations accepted. And I've also got 7 books on Amazon. We'll talk about those. They're listed on here. You can see them. And then we'll talk about them more towards the end. All right. So that gives you one major resource I've got here. And then logistics. Hang on a second. Where'd my logistics go? We'll go for an hour. And we'll do a Q&A at the end. Hang on, I lost my logistics page. And then, here we go. I retitled the page, missed it. All right, so 60 minutes, 97% content. Ask questions as we go. I'll answer those as best I can. We'll do a Q&A at the end. I haven't done that in years, but I'm doing that. This is sponsored by WebEx today. I want to thank them for all their help in promoting this. So we'll hang around and do that for as long as it takes after our hour, let's say. And I'd rather, if you miss a question, you can email me or call me. I'd rather talk on the phone than read long emails or write long emails. So don't hesitate. I'll give you my calendar link if you want to have a longer conversation, and you can just call me. I'm very available. And one final thing, if you don't hear me, let me know right away in the question box. One time I muted myself. Nobody said anything for about 5 minutes. So anyway, don't let that happen. And if I get disconnected, occasionally that happens. Like once a week, I'm on a VoIP line. It's usually very good, but occasionally it just cuts out on me. So give me a couple of seconds to dial back in. So I'm not expecting that to happen. It doesn't happen that often, but it does happen occasionally. And then if you want more volume, if you're on your computer speakers, I recommend you just call in. That's pretty much free for most everybody today. If you use the phone, that's kind of solves the volume problem. All right. I think that covers logistics. So let's try 2 basic types of selling. This is a kind of a famous distinction for me in my 38 years of coaching. I'm definitely a relationship builder. The champion of the relationship builder. You've got really client controllers, to me, are traditional people, traditional selling style, aggressive, pushy, controlling. The goal is to do whatever it takes to make a sale. If you don't make a sale, you failed. Okay, I think nothing wrong with that, but to me, there's better ways to do this job. I started out being a client controller. I was really good at it, but I never liked how I felt. I'd stay there for 3 hours and get a check. And that felt good to kind of conquer and get the sale. But I also, in the back of my mind, I'm always going, there's got to be an easier way, So if you're a relationship builder, which I assume everybody on this call is, that you're not pushy. You don't like to make people uncomfortable. You don't like conflict. You want to get along. You want to make friends. You don't want to wrestle with the client. You want good communication with the client, and you want to share ideas. You want them to feel good about what you're doing. So that's a very different kind of person than the client controller. Corporations. Oh, hang on. Let me switch to my next. We're good. Corporations tend to be giant egos, and We'll talk more about that as we're going here. I'm big on the ego in terms of defining that as kind of an aggressive, dominating, controlling energy. Most people think the ego is a source of self-esteem and self-importance, which is true, but that's about 1%. The other 99% of the ego is kind of a nasty piece of work, very negative, constantly being critical. It's always chattering away in the background there, and that's one of the keys to my breakthroughs in my coaching in recent time, is to quiet that ego. But basically, you've got a sales organization or a corporation is a giant ego. They're all about numbers. They want the bottom line. They don't really care how you do it. So they're not really relationship oriented. That's the main point. And I think that's given me a job for many years, is helping people find a way to do this job or to be in sales in an environment that tends to be pretty pushy and aggressive. Because the basic idea is take the most direct line to making a sale, which is try to create a need in the client's mind, then push, control, do whatever you can to, or legally to get the client to buy. Some people call it pitch and close. And that's okay. I'm not trying to convert that group of the client controllers. But if you're a relationship builder, there's a big difference, and you've got to approach this business very differently than the training that we all got. Some of my clients, I say, your heart's in the right place, but you've been trained by wolves. That's usually the problem. All right. So the closing ratio is an interesting one. I mean, the average client controller's got about a 30% closing ratio. They don't really get over that. My typical client's more in the 90 range. Some people kid me and say theirs is way higher than that. I've got a lot of fun stories about that. But the reality is, if you're helping people get exactly what they want, if you're a good interviewer and people trust you, and you're creating the program together, I mean, that's what creates the 90% closing ratio. I say to people, you can throw away the book of the 35 closes. This isn't about that at all. You don't need any closes. You just ask people what they want to do at the end. Because the sale happens during the process. It doesn't happen at the end. The total opposite of the client controller. Because again, they're pitching, they're trying to create a need and doing everything you can, answer objections. I don't do anything on objections. What's the objection to getting exactly what you want? There isn't one. So anyway, it's a very different style. And you can fine tune this. You can be really good at this. I've helped thousands of people do it. They would never go back to what they were doing. I mean, I've got a guy I worked with. I think he's the oldest advisor at Thrivent. He's been in the business 50 years. I talked to him a little bit last year. He's in LA. We talked a couple of years ago. But I remember we were laughing because he was just saying, he said after he worked with me we worked off and on for about a year together. And then he just said that, he says now he kind of sits there and bites his tongue and doesn't do all the stuff he used to do, all the more aggressive things. He says, I just sit there and listen. And he says, it's amazing. People write me checks. It really can be that simple. You kind of got to see it to believe it. But this job is way easier than people make it. I like to say especially your average guy tends to complicate things to death. We don't need to complicate it. The ego tends to complicate things, and even women complicate it more than they need to, even though they tend to be a little more intuitive often. We'll talk about that more as we're going here. So let's go to the next slide. Challenges. What I'm really saying is, if you're not clear about how to be a relationship builder and know what the differences are between the client controller and relationship builder in terms of selling style, you're operating way below your potential. You probably don't have enough prospects. You may have some call reluctance. Referrals are a gold mine. A lot of people don't even ask for referrals. You've been taught to expect referrals or demand referrals. That makes people semi-nuts, because you go out, you do it one time, it doesn't work, and then you don't want to do it. I'll do a seminar on referrals here coming up soon. To me, it's very simple. I've got a couple little tricks that make all the difference, and all of that's on my website too. Under the supplemental training, there's a couple good webinars on referrals. But anything like, anything demanding, pushy, trying to get people to do stuff, you just don't need to do any of that. The premise tends to be people are too dumb to buy insurance or investments or whatever you're selling on their own, and that's just not true. So again, we're after trying to get your performance and your confidence issues way up on prospecting, referrals, developing centers, interviewing, and closing. And we're talking about closing today, but it's all very connected. All right. How to stop the inner conflict and increase sales. So it's kind of two things going on at the same time. We want to increase your closing ratio, and we also want to get rid of the conflict of moving away from the client controller type mentality, so you can really be grounded in being a relationship builder. So probably the most important paradigm shift is to change your intent. You're changing it from trying to make a sale to helping people make an educated decision that feels right to him or her, which includes doing nothing. Okay, I'll give you some more real specific language coming up on that, but that's really one of my most important clarifications on what the difference is between a client controller and a relationship builder. Is you're changing the process away from a sales process to a decision-making process. It doesn't sound like a big deal, but it's huge. Because your goal obviously is to still make sales, but you're going to do it very differently. No pressure, no sales technique, because you don't need it. And for the client controller, it's simple. You do whatever it takes to make the sale, and that's a whole other system that's got all this stuff that you do, most of which makes you uncomfortable if you're a relationship builder. I mean, if you're making friends with people, and then all of a sudden you switch to sales technique, it feels weird to everybody, you and them. It's a great rapport breaker, you could call it. So anyway, you don't need to do it, and you can have a closing ratio triple what the client controllers are doing. And the other thing the client controller can't say is they doing nothing's not an option, because if they don't make a sale, they failed. They're used to failure, so they're more okay with it. But if you're a relationship builder, why would you want to fail? Failure meaning your goal is to help people make an educated decision that feels right to them. And if there's really nothing to do at this point, because that's what feels right, then you've succeeded. That's a success. Again, very different. You're not going to hear that in a sales meeting, but that's the way I think about it. And again, I've created some of the biggest biggest producers in this business that swear by this approach. Guarantee you. So if people feel pressure, that's another way to say it. If you're developing a relationship and all of a sudden people feel some kind of pressure, sales pressure, it's human nature to resist and object. In other words, you want to get rid of the sales pressure. You're hoping that doesn't happen, but you're expecting it usually as the client. So there's a shift here. There's three things people want. They want information about financial issues. They want to feel heard and feel understood. That's huge. That's probably the biggest thing that creates trust. People want to feel heard and understood, and they don't want sales pressure. So why not just offer that to people? Those are the things they really want. Again, the client controller world is you can't trust people to make a buying decision without pushing them. But if you're helping people, again, talk about what they want to talk about so that they feel heard and feel understood, and don't do the sales pressure, your closing ratio is going to skyrocket. And I think the other way to say it is when you take away the sales pressure, you shift away from being a salesperson into being a trusted advisor. And of course, what happens at that point, when people relax, they open up. And when people open up, they start looking for stuff to buy. Again, you're not going to hear that in a typical sales meeting, but that's how it works. Because when people feel sales pressure, then they hold back. There's resistance and objections. If they feel like you're on their side, and I'm going to talk a lot about today, how do you demonstrate to people you're on their side? Because that's the key. I'm big on trust. To me, you should be able to create a relationship of trust in a half hour and demonstrate to people that you're trustworthy, both in terms of what you're doing and what you're saying. You can do it that fast. Now, not everybody. I mean, sometimes you need a little time to believe it. You want to continue to see validation that this is somebody you can trust. But you can set it up. I guess to me that's a lot of what I've spent much of my coaching career. I'm really good on the setup. To me, how you set up the relationship with the potential client pretty much determines the closing ratio, and that's what we're talking about here today. All right, so let's go to the next slide here. Demonstrate you're on the client's side. Opening language, probably one of the most important things to do here. I'm just going to read it to you. I will send you an email later today with the opening language, so you don't need to write it down. See if I've got that here. I know it from memory. Well, I'll just do the version off the top of my head here. So how you set up the relationship, I was saying, this is one of the things you want to use somewhere in the first meeting. I call it the opening language. It basically goes like this. My job is to help you make educated decisions about your finances that feel right to you. Actually, let me back up. One thing I also like to say there is I'm a little different. I'm bringing different values to the table, or I do this job a little differently than a lot of people. My job is to help you make educated decisions that feel right to you about your finances, which includes doing nothing if that's what feels right. This is not about me trying to talk you into buying a product so you can relax. People physically relax when you say that. Of course, I've got lots of products you can buy, but that's not a requirement for you and I to be friends and for me to help you. Now, there's several different versions, if that one's, that you can choose from. That's my favorite. In fact, I had a guy. I used to do seminars a lot. I used to travel to speak a lot, and I had somebody call me that afternoon and say, "I went out and tried your opening language." He said it was magic. He said that I was working with a couple. And I said, I went through your language. The guy said he read it. He read the handout, and he said it was the most amazing thing because he said they both relaxed when I told them they could relax, and then they finished up, and the woman said, "Wow, we've been praying for somebody like you." That's the way you want to start an interview. So anyway, it's powerful because you're taking away. You're starting to demonstrate and take away all that sales energy. There's a number of ways to do it, which we'll keep coming up with more here. But that's one of my favorites. There's another part to it, which I also like to add on, which is I'll make you another promise, Bob and Mary. I don't want you to ever make a decision that doesn't feel right to you. If it doesn't feel right, we're not doing it, period. Does that sound like a fair approach? Man, people just eat that up. That's what people want. They don't know how to ask for it. That's the key. So, and think about this for a second. Who would you rather work with? Someone who generally wants to help you make decisions that feel right to you, educated decisions. In other words, your job is to help bring the information to the table and show people what the options are and be a good interviewer so they can figure out what they want to do. Or do you want to work with somebody who's going to try to sell you something? And some people are really good at that. Well, to me, it's really easy. I feel like somebody's trying to sell me something, I start laughing. They don't like it. I can tell you a number of stories about that. All right. So anyway, you'll be blown away. Just try that. Try the opening language. I'll send it to you. I'll send it to you in an email later today. All right. I got everything on here. And the last point I've got, would you rather, the relationship goes from adversarial to partnership. Partnership's what you want. You don't want an adversarial relationship with your clients. All right, another big one. This is kind of obvious, but I think it's worth touching on. Chemistry, timing, and money. I came up with this probably 25 years ago. I used to call it chemistry and timing initially. If you're a relationship builder, are you selling to people where there's no chemistry? Probably not. Maybe a few. I've had people tell me this was the biggest thing they got out of working with me as a coach, was to make a commitment to only working with people you have chemistry with. What's chemistry? You like each other. You've got similar values. There's similar something. You've got things you like about each other. Timing means that people have got they want something that you're currently offering, or they've got a need for it. And then money obviously means they got to have money to buy it. Chemistry is probably the most important if you're a relationship oriented person, because the timing and the money can change. I've seen that happen a lot. I've been in this business a long time, and people can end up with lots of money that you met years ago, and then a third of my clients are over 65. Some of those people are writing monster cases on people they met decades ago. that are now have a lot of money. And so keep track of the people where you got chemistry. And I guess the other way to say it too, from an economy of scale sort of thing, if there's chemistry there, those people buy quicker, they buy more often, and they refer their friends. I mean, that's all worth money. That's all profit. So it's a big deal. And again, if you start getting red flags in the beginning, when you start to see things that just aren't quite working. I mean, sometimes it takes a while to find out if the chemistry's there, or sometimes you know right away. But if you start seeing red flags, those are only going to get worse. You're seeing the tip of the iceberg. And I've had many people tell me over the years, the people that they didn't have chemistry with, that had a lot of money, they took them on as clients. They were all nightmares. They're just, some people fire them, some people put up with them, depending on how thick their skin is. But that's pretty typical. The people you don't have chemistry with, so their account's always falling apart. They're complaining about what you're doing. It's no fun. So anyway, that wouldn't come up in a client controller sales meeting. I mean, chemistry is a feeling. They'd laugh me out of the room. But if you're a relationship builder, you have much greater sensitivity. You're much more intuitive. This is a way bigger deal. And I would say to a great degree is almost a key to success. For sure, it's a key to closing more. If you've got chemistry with people, the likelihood of you closing the deal, I would say, doubles easily. And you've already seen that. And if the chemistry's not there, either you're going to have to sell it and resell it, or it's going to fall apart, and it gets worse from there. All right, so you get the idea. And of course, when you start out, if there's new people on here, which I'm sure there are newer people, even at the first few years. I mean, you work with anybody who will talk to you, basically. As you get more into things and get more refined, then you add the chemistry. You start to make. I mean, some people do that right away, but that's not totally necessary. It's okay to, cut your teeth on a few people that maybe the chemistry's not totally there. Everybody I know's got a few hundred clients or more in their file. They hope never call them again, that they wrote in the first few years of the business. But that's normal, so no problem with that. All right, so let's try what's important and why. Now, this is an interesting. I talk a lot about this. This is another key element or paradigm shift that's going to create a lot of increase in your sales. It's probably one of the most often missed things. I wrote a book on it called How to Double Your Sales by Asking a Few More Questions. My website is loaded with information on interviewing. I'll mention right now Module 2 of the core training. I'll put a note in the email I send you I spent a lot of time on that $1,000 course. So it's a 6-hour course, but Module 2 is on interviewing. One of my better pieces on that. And then, of course, the book, How to Double Your Sales by Asking a Few More Questions. That's my biggest selling book. It's been around a while, but it's about how to get to the feeling level in the interview and when you're interviewing a client. And this is one of the key points. What's important and why. And getting people to verbalize what's important and why is magic. When the client speaks, it's magic. And too many people, especially more analytical guys in particular, I have several I've been working with right now on this issue. Your typical analytical guy tends not to ask the questions with an obvious answer. Huge mistake. The more obvious the answer, the more you want to ask the question. Because the thing that counts is getting the client, or the prospective client, to answer the question. Because when people say things, that's when commitment happens. It doesn't happen in their head just because they think you know what they think they want. I mean, that again, don't make assumptions. Make people say things. Ask them what's important. Ask them why it's important. Write down their exact words. I used to, when I first got in the life insurance business, I was, re-editing people's words, to make it sound a little better. And I would go back out to the closing presentation, and they'd look at me like I was talking to somebody else. So use people's exact words. There's just massive amounts of meaning and information attached to those words. You start changing them, you're disorienting your client. So again, what's important? Why is it important? Get people to verbalize that. I'll go through some questions you can ask. There's also the quick connection track. That's in the supplemental training. I think it's number 4, quick connection track review. highly recommend you listen to it. That's also in the handout. I'll make a note of that on the email I'm going to send you today as well. It'll be a long email with lots of good stuff in it. But that quick connection track is really more how do you connect with people in the first 30 minutes to 40 minutes, start to get the trust process going. To me, the worst thing you can do is start with a fact finder. It's way too boring, and it's not interesting enough for people. Plus, the deepest level of rapport is shared feelings. There's no reason not to have shared feelings happen in the first interview, even in the first half hour, 40 minutes. One of the most powerful things you can do. Rapport is having things in common, people, places, and things. The most powerful rapport is shared feelings. And you can share some of yours if it's appropriate, but for sure you want to get the client to share some of their feelings about what's important to them. Huge. Because as soon as you do that, you're connecting with people in a very powerful way. Most of my clients are really good at sealing other people's clients because they're better at connecting. 70% of the people are not that excited about their financial advisor because they kind of showed up. Sometimes there's a relationship there, often there's not. If you're a relationship builder and you're attracting other relationship builders, they want a connection. They want to feel like you understand them and you've heard them and you know them. That's what relationship oriented means. There's a connection, so it's a big deal. So getting people to verbalize what's important and why, I'm saying that will double your closing ratio. So let's go to, let's try this here. All right, I'm going to do, see if that's the one. Yeah, here we go. This is called Getting More Commitment. I'm just going to run through some of these questions. I'll probably, I'll just tell you where this is. It's on the website. In fact, let me show you right now. If you go over here to the handout archives all the way over to the right, this is where we're working here. Opening language, which I discussed, that's number 13. And then we're doing Getting More Commitment, which is number 5. Okay. So that's all in the handout archives. There's hundreds of pages of handouts in there from seminars I've done over the years. All right, so Getting More Commitment. See if I can make that a little bigger. Usually, the best way to get this started is you've got a few different options. In the quick connection track, you say things like, let me tell you a little bit about what people like about what we do. First you find you've got somebody you can trust. Another one, then there's a paragraph on that. Then the second thing would be you've got a plan you understand. A little more explanation. The third thing would be we put your interests first. So that's one way to do it in the first meeting, kind of give people some options and then ask them questions about those options. In this example, I'm just saying, let's just say you talk to people for a little while, and in the process of the interview, you ended up with, you're talking about they want to pay off the house, they got to have money to educate the children, and then they want to have some money for retirement. So you've got several options. So there's a number of different ways to do this, but I'm just going to run through this so you can get an idea. This is really how you get people to verbalize what's important and why in order to create some commitment. So, so of those three things, Bob and Mary, we've talked about, paying off the house, education for the kids, and your retirement. What would you say would be most important? They might say all three. They may have different, the husband and wife may have different attitudes. You just go with whatever they say. Again, you're taking notes when you're doing this. You want to get their exact words. Then number 2 is one of my favorite questions. Bob and Mary, a lot of people say that putting money away for retirement is important. Let's say they pick that one. Why is that important to you? In other words, you don't want to ever let people get away with, I feel the same way as everybody else, or some kind of non-committed answer. Why is that important to you? Just so I understand how you feel about this. Everybody actually occupies a different point of view in physical reality. There is no such thing as the same as everybody else. Okay, so you might ask that question several times in an interview. Why is that important to you? I want to understand how you feel about it. Because remember that when you're selling yourself and you're trying to create yourself as a trusted advisor, the most powerful thing you can do is to get people to feel heard and feel understood. Very different. It's not about a sales pitch. It's about having people feel heard and understood. Very different. All right, so you get an answer. A lot of people say it's important. Maybe they say, we we feel maybe they picked putting your interest for. Oh no, we're talking about putting money away. Maybe they just said that they want to have that they feel like that they've seen their retirement statistics, and a lot of people don't end up with any money. They don't want to be in that group. They want to be in the group that's got some money when they retire. So then you say, okay, a lot of people say that's important. Well, you can say, you could go again on ask them again, why is that important? That can be a little too much sometimes. You've said, why is that important to you? A lot of times that'll give you the answer. Sometimes if people give you kind of a logical answer, maybe they say, well, I think it's a good idea to put money away. That would be a place where you could jump in and say, well, tell me more about that. Why? What would you do with the money? Why is it important to put money away? So if there's an opening there, keep going. But if people give you a pretty elaborate answer, a bunch of good reasons, why it's important, you're good. Because then you want to get. I get a car dealership. A buddy of mine who used to say, you got to get people riding in the car. We're all in intangible sales, so you got to make this stuff real. So one of the most powerful ways to make things real is to say that let's just say that you found that you and I work together. Well, let's go back to the three choices. Let's just say that you've got somebody you're working with that's going to help you with retirement, so that you feel like that you've got somebody looking out for your needs, and that you're going to feel like the odds are increased that you're going to succeed at reaching your goals to have money when you are retirement age. How would that help? If you had all that, how would that help in the long run? That's this question here. So I jumped around a little bit on that, but the main idea is get people out in the future. If you ask people how does that help you in the long run, that gets them out in the future. That gets them riding in the car. On the quick connection track, I get a bunch of details in here. I'll say to people, tell me more about what do you want to be able to do when you're retirement age. They'll say they want to travel. They want to spend more time with the grandkids. They want to play more golf. They want to be able to maintain their lifestyle. They want to have total freedom to do whatever they want to do. All those are going to show up there. And then as you get more detail, again, you've started out finding out what's important. Why is that important to you? Then you're saying, okay, if you had that, how would that help you in the long run? And you get that answer. You start to get people to start to experience what it would be like to have the thing that they want. Create a vision of it. Get them talking about it. And then number 5 here, can you get a sense of what it would be like to have? What it would be like to have that, whatever they wanted. And that's really, you're just looking for a yes there. Most of the time that's a yes. And then another powerful question at that point, is that an important feeling for you to have? Again, that's a question with an obvious answer. Your average analytical guy would never ask that question. Of course it's important. But when you get people to verbalize that that's important, that's where they commit. I role play this thing all the time with my clients. And when the first time, even when it's a role play, they're way more in touch with what they really want, or what they want and why they want it. So it even works as a role play. I even sometimes I'll have people learn to memorize the quick connection track, and then I'll send them out and say, just go out and do this with your friends and use it as a way to open cases. Just say you want to practice a new sales presentation on them, because you start to get into stuff. People go, I want that. I want you to do that for me. All right. So it's a great way to start a conversation. And then, are you willing to do whatever it takes within reason to reach that goal? So those are 3 powerful questions that a lot of people never ask. Can you get a sense of what it'd be like to have what you want? Is that an important feeling for you to have? Are you willing to do whatever it takes to get that? Got to get people riding in the car, and you got to get them committed to wanting to ride in the car, especially at retirement age. A lot of people are doing other things. Some people actually retire. But I think that's also, if you look at the stats, people don't do too well if they don't have something to do at retirement age. And a lot of them don't last very long. It's kind of an amazing statistic, actually. So it's better for people to have something to do. All right. Well, that gives you some. Let me go back to my slide here. I mentioned the quick connection track. There's an audio on that. There's a handout on it in the handout archives. But if you're interested in this kind of approach, spend a little time on that. You'll pick up a bunch of things. It was actually my sales manager had been with when I was in the life insurance business. Had been with Dale Carnegie for many years. Brilliant guy, and he wrote this track for the life insurance business. I've used it for every kind of intangible sales you can imagine: CPA, consultants, inventors, obviously life insurance, investments, you name it. So give that a look, because it's a powerful. Most powerful way to start an opening interview, or start an initial interview I've ever seen. I've seen everything in 38 years. I've never seen anything any better. Because again, if you're a relationship builder, you want to connect with the client. The goal is you want people to feel excited about what you're doing, and you want them saying, "Well, all right, great. What do we do now? What's next?" How many times do you get that after 40 minutes into an interview? All right. So anyway, this was more a combination of, you could do these kinds of questions after the first interview, after the second interview, anytime. It could be an issue that just comes up. Be asking people to get those questions down on a cheat sheet, and then and trust your intuition, trust your intuitive instincts, which is what we're talking about next. I'm big on intuition here. Power of WFIR. It took me a while last night. I had to think about this because I've written several books on this now, which we'll talk about before we go. But basically, WFIR, what feels intuitively right. And we don't have a lot of time to deal to this discussion, so I'm going to do my best job to give you a summary and going to give you the basics of why this is so important, especially as a closing. When you're working with people as a relationship builder, your goal is to help people make educated decisions that feel right to them. And actually, what feels intuitively right to them is the most powerful thing we're trying to get after. They say emotion makes the sale. That's not emotion. Definitely is a motivator, but what's way more powerful is intuition. If something feels intuitively right, people are going to buy it. Period. That's what we're after. That's why your closing ratio goes way up. When you're helping people create a solution together, when you're helping them figure out what they want to do, when you're being good at interviewing them, what you're proposing at the end of this should be a slam dunk. There might be a few little things to change here and there, but if you've created it together and it's exactly what they want, and they trust you, and it feels right to them, why wouldn't they buy it? Obviously, you're working with people, so there's always exceptions, but it doesn't happen that often. I had one guy in a webinar here a number of years ago. That's probably one of the bigger ones I've done. I had 700 people on there, and it was on how advisors make millions with the low-key approach. But one of my longtime clients, a real character, but he said, since I've been working with Sid, he says, I haven't heard a no in years. Which sounds pretty outrageous, but that's really true. He said, I did a double take. He said, somebody actually said no to me the other day. But if you're helping people get exactly what they want, why wouldn't they buy it? That's the shift. So it's not having a 90% closing ratio because you're a good closer. It's not about closing. The sale's made long before you close it. Or the closing being, what do you want to do, Bob and Mary? All right. So anyway, back to the two databases. You've got the conscious mind as one database, then you've got your intuition. And in our culture, we tend to be we use our conscious mind most of the time. There's reasons for that I'll touch on here. But our intellect, our analytical mind, our conscious mind, when you take a test, for example, the conscious mind only holds a certain amount of information. So you cram for the test, you take the test, and then you forget most of the information, within a day. So that's typically the way most people are using their memory and their conscious mind. So that database is tiny. It only holds a small amount of information. The intuitive database, on the other hand, is so big it's incomprehensible. I'll just leave it at that. I could give you all kinds of examples, but it's huge, and it has total recall. There really isn't anything that's not in your intuition, and I can talk about that as well. It's bigger than big. Okay, and so the other key aspect is there's no limit to what your intuition can remember and how fast it can process information. Sports are a great example in our culture. You can't play sports analytically, or you don't play sports with your conscious mind. It's too slow. In other words, your analytical mind is a plotting, figured out kind of entity. It's very important, but again, I used to played a lot of sports. I'm a good sports guy. Played a lot of ice hockey when I was younger, and I used to play, with Michigan State varsity guys. I managed an ice arena for a while right out of college before I got in the insurance business, which was a lot of fun. And at midnight, I'd have a bunch of guys come out and skate from 12 to 1, try not to kill each other, and then go close the bars kind of thing. The good old days. But Michigan State guys, some NHL guys, IHL. We had an IHL team in the ice arena. Really fun. Those guys are unconsciously good. They were all Canadian. I mean, if you stop and think, you were either out of the game or you got run over. So I mean, hockey is just a very great example of highly intuitive. I mean, anything fast moving tends to be fast moving and dangerous. Skiing is another one. I've done a lot of skiing. Lived in Colorado for a lot of years. That's very intuitive. Where you're on the fly. I mean, or driving a sports car. I mean, anything where you're doing where you don't have time to think, you just react. That's what I'm calling being intuitive. Your intuition has the ability to process, make choices. It can process millions of pieces of information per second and make a choice. Now, here's the question. So you've got the two databases. One's tiny, one's huge. We've been trained pretty much to ignore the intuitive database and go with the conscious mind. We go with the conscious database, which is, again, tiny. We don't remember that much information. But the main difference is, with your conscious mind, everything's kind of provable and observable. You can figure a thing out with linear logic. Our whole academic system is all based on that. With intuition, you only get the answer. You only get the direction. You don't get any details. So it actually requires a leap of faith to trust your intuition or to trust your intuitive instincts. You don't get proof. Now, I tell people, my clients all the time, I've been doing this forever, to keep a log. I've kept one for over 25 years. Keep a log of every time you make an intuitive choice and what happened. Because what you're going to find is how smart your intuition really is. And don't worry, everybody's got intuition. We'll talk about that in a second. It's in there. I mean, if you can get out of bed and go to the office, you're using your intuition. Anytime you're doing economy of movement, you're just walking around. There's massive amounts of things happening in your body. You do without thinking. That's intuitive. So, again, it's there. But the difference is when you're asking yourself questions, that's how you engage your intuition. You say, okay, what should I do here, or what's next? You do that in an interview. In fact, I'll tell you right now, one of the most important things you can do in an interview, when your intuition floats questions into your awareness, when you're interviewing somebody, write the question down on your yellow pad. That will be one of the most important questions in the whole interview. And we've been trained to ignore that. We've been trained to call those fleeting thoughts. When your intuition is brilliant, and it's going to tell you what to do all the time. It's right there. And most of us don't listen to it. It's really subtle. Most of us are listening to our ego, trying to do a system, trying to do things correctly. We're trying to plug again. We're using the conscious mind. We're plotting rather than using the brilliance of our intuitive instincts. Which again takes a little training. Some of you do it now. Some of you do it a little better than others. But for the most part, everybody's got to start moving in that direction. But the first thing you got to understand is your intuition is brilliant. A lot of people would say it's always right. Now, you can give emotion and intuition are not the same. They're both feelings. Emotion tends to be more an intense experience. Intuition is very subtle. It's usually a quiet sense of knowing that something's either right or not right. The intuition usually encourages you to move towards something and move away from something. There's no detail. It's just a feeling. And again, it's interesting from a closing standpoint because when you think of, there's been a couple books out in recent years. One of them is I think The Primordial Brain or something, where they're basically saying that we've been making life and death decisions before we could speak for thousands of years. So the part of the brain that's actually making the most important decisions is a feeler, not a thinker. So that's the part. Again, I guess that's what have I got down. The most important question you can ask. The most important question you can ask in a sales interview is, okay, Bob and Mary, we know this makes sense. We've looked at it every possible angle here. We've created a program that fits everything you've said you wanted. The real key question is, does this feel right? And again, not very many people ask that question, but that's an important question. Does it feel right? Because you're tapping into that deep-seated intuitive feeling of, does it fit their values? Does it fit somehow? The ability to process millions of pieces of information, and people are making the best decisions based on that part of the brain, not based on the logical part. So some of the misinformation is people think it's a combination of logic and emotion, What's really going on, if people buy things and keep them and refer you to other people, they're buying it because it feels right. It feels intuitively right. So that becomes your focus as a way to increase your closing ratio. Because if something feels right to people, they're going to buy it and they're going to keep it. Then they're going to refer their friends to you. You can't beat that. So a couple other ways to think about this. It's like if you're traveling across country or maybe you're taking a short trip, the intellect or the conscious mind would be the equivalent of a magnifying glass. So it's very good if it's looking at very narrow focus. If you're adding a column of numbers, the intellect is great. But when you're working with people, which is extremely complicated, or again, if you're traveling cross country, your intuition is the equivalent of Google Maps. Massive amounts of information, and it can shift the perspective in a second. So the resources on the intuitive side are unbelievable. And again, in sports, you can't play sports analytically; it's too slow. And a lot of other things in life, anything that requires any kind of pace, any kind of speed, you gotta get into your intuition. In fact, another thing, in the academic environment, which tends to be very analytical, conscious mind oriented, I've got an article from a Harvard Business Review from years ago that basically says the more complicated the problem, the more you need to include intuition because of the intellect's propensity to make obvious mistakes because of its narrow perspective. The intellect is very good at looking at a tiny lens. It's very good with the magnifying glass. But as soon as things get complicated, it's not worth much. That's where you need the intuition. That's where you need the bigger perspective. All right. Then I've written a book on that. It's called How to Double Your Sales by asking a few more questions. And let's see, is there anything else I want to say about this? Again, being more intuitive has really been a lifelong work for me. I would say that's been the key to my greatest successes, really, in terms of getting people to the next level. It's a combination of getting people to learn what their negative ego sounds like and to ignore it. Your ego is brilliant. It never sleeps. It knows every trick in the book. It's been around for thousands of years. My Catholic clients call the ego the devil. So it's a nasty piece of work. And the more you can ignore your ego and trust your intuitive instincts, your life will change in magical ways. I guarantee it. Some of you have already experienced that. Everybody's experienced it, but some of you are doing it on a more regular basis. But to me, there's nothing more fun. And that's one reason I coach financial advisors, is that they've got freedom to do anything they want. If you're making a certain amount of money, nobody cares what you're doing. So I started out working with Fortune 500 executives, a lot of politics. And because I'd had the life insurance experience, I drifted back into working with financial advisors, and I'm 3,500 financial advisors into it now. Lots of other people as well, as I said. But to me, this is just one of the best jobs there is in terms of your ability to impact people's lives for good, to help people achieve their financial goals, and you get to do it the way you want to do it. You get to do it the way that feels right to you. That's the good news. All right. And one other thing too, if you're being intuitive, it doesn't mean you don't analyze. They're meant to be a team. They're meant to work together. Your intuition will tell you when you need to analyze. Your intuition will tell you when you need to do some due diligence. They're meant to work as a team. And the way our academic system, you get so analytical. The intuition actually ends up looking like some fleeting thought. If you don't have proof, it's of no value. When the reality is, if it's coming from your higher self, your intuitive self, which is really where your higher intelligence is, you're going to get a better answer from that part of you. How many times have you known something was going to happen, and then you went with your intellect or what you thought was what you were supposed to do, and it didn't work out, or it was a disaster, and you look back on it and you go, I knew what to do and I didn't trust myself. That's what we're after. That's what has created $1 million producers. My most famous coaching clients to me are the ones that were ready to quit, that I got to over $1 million a year production. There's a bunch, and it's not from sales skills. It's not from being a financial genius. It's about learning to be your authentic self. In fact, while we're on the topic, I guess I'm leading into our next coaching options. I've got the free option there. Get on sellingwithoutwrestling.com. It's free. 85% of my program is on there. 100 hours of audio. That'll keep you busy. I tell people it's not there's a few things you could memorize of what I do, but most of it's just getting a feel for what we're doing. So check that out. I think you'll find that's a powerful resource. And I am adding things to it. I've been writing books the last couple of years. I'll tell you about those in a second. If you want to talk more about coaching, I've got my calendar link there. Send me an email, and I'll send you back the calendar link if you don't have it. But let's spend half hour or so talking on the phone, just to find out kind of what's important to you, anything that you want to try to change. Most of the time, there's usually things people want to change or they want to do differently, and that's basically just talk long enough so we can find out, if there's something that you want to work on that feels right, and I feel like the right guy. So anyway, take me up on my offer. A lot of times I can give people some great ideas just in a half hour, 40-minute call. So get a hold of my calendar link and get on there. What makes me different, just a couple things there, and this is kind of a big deal. My focus is on helping people do what they need to do in a way that fits your values. In other words, there's a lot of coaches out there, they're teaching some kind of system. I'm not big on systems. If you're a relationship person, systems aren't going to work most of the time. Maybe 10, 15% of the time they might work, or there might be some good things in there. But the more relationship-oriented you are, the more intuitive you're going to be. The more you're going to do what feels right in the moment. That's where your success is going to come from. Is your ability to check in with yourself and do what feels right in the moment. So that's a big distinction between my coaching and a lot of other people. I've helped a lot, I would say, helping people be their authentic self, which is both a combination of having the skill to do it and the awareness of doing it. People say just be yourself. That's way more difficult than you think, especially in a sales job. I spend 80% of my time talking people out of all the junk they've learned. How's that? All right. All right. So my calendar link. Send me an email if you don't have that somehow, and then I'll send it out. I'll send you an email this afternoon with all that information. Books. I've got a bunch of books. I've written 2 recently. There's only one that's not on Amazon. I've been moving everything to Amazon, so I'm not really doing any fulfillment other than my one book. If you want my book, How to Double Your Sales, order that on sidwalker.com. I'll put that in the email, but go to sidwalker.com, and you can get it on Amazon, but it's a lot quicker if you get it through me. It's the only book I don't have, the soft cover. It's there, but they got to order it from me, and they're currently out. So anyway, just order that one from me. Everything else is on Amazon. Here's the How to Double Your Sales. This is my biggest selling book. It's been around the longest. This is on how to get to the feeling level in the interview. If the intuition thing sounds interesting to you, this is kind of the beginner's book for being more intuitive. I wrote this about in the late 80s. I updated it a couple of times. It was originally called Trusting Yourself. I updated it to Trust Your Gut. But this is a very simple formula, very powerful. People love this book. I still sell a ton of them. So check that out, Trust Your Gut. And then my last 2 books, I've got the #1 book on overcoming call reluctance on Amazon. That's a big title, How I Conquered Call Reluctance, Fear of Self-Promotion, and Increased My Prospecting. This is also on audio. I sell a ton of those. I probably sell 4 to 1 audio to books because salespeople like audio, so I've been doing that here in recent years. But anyway, people love this book. Check that out. If you've got any kind of call reluctance, I waited 30 years to write this book, so it's good. And then Living in the Zone. This is my most out there book. I've had a kind of a very eclectic background. I've gotten to the leadership level in a lot of programs, including 10 years as a lay monk in a monastery run by women in California. How's that? So that was the most advanced program on intuition you can imagine. So I put a lot of stuff, living in the zone. Basically, some of my biggest breakthroughs have happened in the last couple of years. I've alluded to that. The biggest thing to focus on, learn what the ego sounds like, learn to ignore your ego, and then be more intuitive, because that's the smartest part of your brain. That will do amazing things to your life. in all respects. And that's what this book is about, Living in the Zone, which is also on audio. All right. So and there's some other books. I've got 7 books. I won't get into all of them there. I've even have a novel that I put a lot of my material in. I was living in LA. Everybody's in the movie business, so I wrote a novel actually to be a movie. All right. Looks like it's 12 noon here in the mountains. So it's time to wind up. I want to thank everybody for being on the call here today. I will send you an email. I've made some promises. I got to work on that email and tell you all the things that are available. I'm going to stick around and do a Q&A. Like I said, I haven't done that in a long time, but we'll give it a shot. If there's people that have got questions, I'm going to end the webinar. I'm not going to record the questions. So anyway, let me say goodbye to those people that have to run. Take an idea or two from today and go try it out. The key to growth is to go try something that feels right. And then I want to thank everybody for attending today. We had a great crowd, lots of new people, and lots of familiar names. I saw a lot of people, names I recognized in the roster there. So anyway, glad you could join us today. Hopefully you got something you can use, and I'll say goodbye for now, and we will do this again. All right. Okay, so hang on here. Let me go up here. I'm going to stop the recording. 10 days dashboard sharing. I think that's the one. All right, let me